The creative person has a special gift, his private vision of the world. The artist, through words, images, music, ideas, touches our view of the 20th century.
If you like topical songs, New York's Gaslight Cafe is the place to go.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to start out with a real protest song called I Ain't Marching Anymore, which I guess I'll dedicate to the men and boys of the Air Force Academy.
For Phil Ochs and most of the other topical folk singers who write both the words and music of their songs, the Gaslight is a second home. Here, where many of them got their start, they can always count on an appreciative audience.
Oh, I marched to the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the early British wars. The young land started growing, the young blood started flowing, but I ain't marching anymore. For I killed my share of Injuns in 1,000 different fights. I was there at the Little Big Horn. I heard many men lying, I saw many more dying, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? For I stole California from the Mexican land, fought in the bloody Civil War. Yes, I even killed my brothers and so many others, but I ain't marching anymore. For I marched to the battles of the German trench in a war that was bound to end all wars. Oh, I must have killed 1,000,000 men and now they want me back again, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? For I flew the final mission in the Japanese skies, set off the mighty mushroom roar. When I saw the cities burning, I knew that I was learning that I ain't marching anymore. Now the labor leaders screaming when they close the missile plant. United Fruit screams at the Cuban shore. Call it peace or call it treason, call it law or call it reason, but I ain't marching anymore. I ain't marching anymore. Yeah, well, when I went to college, my first 2 years were just drifting. At that time, I'd stopped reading, and I lost interest in a lot of things, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And about the middle of it, in college, I just started to write, and not music, just writing stories and satires, and so journalism became the thing then. I just decided I wanted to become a writer of sorts. And then when I learned the guitar, and it all came together. I mean, it was like a new freedom. It was a new sphere, a new area to delve into. A song has an emotional attraction by itself. If you're a thinking person, and if you add on words that say something, words that have meaning, and words that have pertinence to this time, you get double power. You get extremely potent communication going. The thought of a song like I Ain't Marching Anymore being sold on a mass level, which is quite possible now. This is the most incredible thing to me, anyway, because this is not Where Have All the Flowers Gone? It's not Blowing in the Wind. It's not If I Had a Hammer. It's not a song that can be commercially arranged and sold without thinking of the words, which is the whole big difference that is often overlooked. Because oftentimes in the past, people argued and said, well, has topical music made it or not? And they'd argue about all these songs that we're selling that I just mentioned. But in a sense, the topical music never sold, to the public, because these were safe topical songs that could be overlooked and unheard of. And what's happening now is that songs that cannot be overlooked, impossible to be arranged out or to be changed around, blunt, right-to-the-point songs are now reaching a mass audience. And this is this is the most exciting thing of everything, that for the first time in American history, I think that real, honest, bitter, even, controversy can reach a mass audience. As you lost yourself on the chain, as you lost yourself on the chain.
The rapidly growing topical song audience is composed mainly of young people. In the same way that an earlier generation responded to the labor songs of Woody Guthrie in the 30s, they respond to the labor songs of Phil Ochs in the 60s. But where Guthrie extolled the unions, Links in the Chain criticizes them for their stand on civil rights.
As they watch you lose your leg along the chain. You know when they block your trucks, boys, falling on the road. All that they are doing is all that you have shown. That you gotta strike, you gotta fight to get what you are owed. When you're building all your lanes on the chain, when you're building all your lanes on the chain. And the man who tries to tell you that they'll take your job away, he's the same man who was scabbing hard just
Woody Guthrie, the patron saint of the topical song movement, has been in failing health for several years. His place has been taken by Pete Seeger, who has been singing topical songs for more than 2 decades.
Well, it's new in a sense that there are a lot of young people in the cities who've got the idea, but I think it's an old idea. In one sense, you could say almost every folk song was a topical song in the beginning. I think it was George Bernard Shaw that said all good art was basically propaganda, whether it was a Michelangelo painting or Beethoven symphony or a play by Shaw. I think myself that if a song really is a good song, it's trying to say something. Even if it's a little lullaby. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. It's not you're just only trying to put a kid to sleep. You're calling up all kinds of little images of the kid's life. I know when I joke about it, when I used to sing lullabies to my kids, they'd howl me down because they didn't want to go to sleep. As far as they were concerned, my lullaby was a propaganda song. I think it was back in the 1930s. I met this remarkable singer from Kentucky, Aunt Molly Jackson. She knew lots of old English ballads, but she used to make up songs too. Her husband was a coal miner, and in 1932, they were trying to unionize the coal fields in eastern Kentucky, and she became an enthusiastic supporter of the union. She went around giving speeches for them and made up songs too. I am a union woman, just brave as I can be. I do not like the bosses, and the bosses don't like me. Well, to some people this was just strange and not really music, but to me it was very exciting. Here was songs that were about things going on. At that day, in the 1930s, most of the popular music heard on the radio was June, Moon, Croon, Spoon. And although there's nothing wrong with June or croon or spoon for that matter, I felt that it was only part of life. And when I came across songs that were about actual events of the day, it seemed very exciting. Not only Aunt Molly's songs, but the songs Woody Guthrie made up about the Dust Bowls. And Leadbelly singing songs about his own life. It makes me very happy that a whole batch of young people have come along now and picked up this idea. They've taken it far beyond where I could, and they've learned from Woody Guthrie, learned his songs and his way of, his approach. See, he wasn't trying to write flashy songs, something that would hit you over the head. They often snuck up on you. It'd be deceptively simple. The first time you'd hear it, you'd think, well, that's just a common, ordinary little thing. But after a couple of years of singing it, you realize the song's grown on you and become part of your life. And I think people like Tom Paxton and Phil Ochs and Buffy Sainte-Marie and a lot of others have captured this idea.
Tom Paxton sings his song called "What Did You Learn in School Today?"
Learn in school today, dear little boy of mine. What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that Washington never told a lie. I learned that soldiers seldom die. I learned that everybody's free, and that's what the teacher said to me. And that's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. And what did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that policemen are my friends. I learned that justice never ends. I learned that murderers die for their crimes, even if we make a mistake sometimes. And that's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. And what did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned our government must be strong. It's always right and never wrong. Our leaders are the finest men, and we elect them again and again. And that's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. And what did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that war is not so bad. I learned about the great ones we have had. We fought in Germany and in France, and someday I might get my chance. And that's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school.
I'd love to have our schools teach history on an elementary level with a little more guts to it, a little more of the stuff of life. I prefer to teach my kids that the founders of our country were very, very human people with human faults as well as high motives. My chief influence has obviously been Woody Guthrie. When I was relying more on traditional material in my performances, when I didn't have enough of my own songs to rely solely on them, I found myself inevitably singing Guthrie songs. I found them to be, not only do audiences love them, but they're so clean and clear-cut and straightforward. And I naturally found myself trying to capture the same sort of thing in my own songs. Of course, I'm not Guthrie. I come from Bristow, Oklahoma, which is just 26 miles from Woody's hometown. But we really came from different worlds. I grew up in a middle class family in an entirely different time. And I'm not a native-born Oklahoman. So I really grew up differently than Woody did. I've tried at different times to be Woody Guthrie, as so many of us have. And I found that trying to speak through somebody else's lips is not the answer. You have to say it yourself in your own way. I just read an editorial wondering why the hell we hadn't dropped an atom bomb on Moscow in 1945 when we had the chance.
Civil rights leaders are a pain in the neck. Can't hold a candle to Shanghai Shek. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. And the bombers are afraid of a fight. Peace hurts business and that ain't right. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. Daily News, Daily Blues. Pick up a copy anytime you choose. 7 little pennies in the newsboy's hand, and you ride right along to Never Never Land. We've got to bomb Castro, bomb him flat. He's too damn successful and we can't risk that. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. There's millions of commies in the freedom fight, yelling for Lenin and civil rights. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. Daily News, Daily Blues. Pick up a copy anytime you choose. 7 little pennies in the newsboy's hand, and you ride right along to Never Never Land. Well, it seems like the whole damn world's gone wrong. St. Joe McCarthy is dead and gone. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. Don't try to change my mind with facts. To hell with the graduated income tax. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. Daily News, Daily Blues. Pick up a copy anytime you choose. 7 little pennies in the newsboy's hand, and you ride right along to Never Never Land. You know John Paul Getty is just plain folks. The UN Charter is a cruel hoax. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. J. Edgar Hoover is the man of the hour. All that he needs is just a little more power. How do I know? I read it in the Daily News. Daily News, Daily Blues. Pick up a copy anytime you choose. 7 little pennies in the newsboy's hand, and you ride right along to Never Never Land.
As Woody once said, I'd like to be remembered as the man who told you something you already knew. I get a little bit of that feeling from some of Tom Paxton's songs. Rambling Boy, something. That he's simply carrying on. It's hard to tell where the individual author begins and where the old tradition leaves off. They're all intermingled. Usually a crisis brings forth some kind of song. The American Revolution was full of songs, hundreds of them. Maybe this is just a parallel, though, of the fact that most people will tend to, if they ever write poetry at all, they write it during some crisis in their lives, whether when they're in love or when something happens. And right now, I think a lot of people realize this is a crisis in the world. Are human beings going to be able to get along in this shrinking world?
Buffy Sainte-Marie is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts with a degree in education and Oriental philosophy. Here, on the border between New York and Pennsylvania, where the Seneca Indians used to live, and where a dam is now under construction, she sings, Now That the Buffalo's Gone.
Can you remember the times that you have held your head high and told all your friends of your Indian claim? Proud good lady and proud good man, your great-great-grandfather from Indian blood sprang, and you feel you're a part of these ones. Oh, it's written in books and in songs that we've been mistreated and wronged. Well, over and over I hear those same words from you, good lady, and you, good man. Well, listen to me if you care where we stand, and you feel in your heart for these ones. When a war between nations is lost, the loser we know pays the cost. But even when Germany fell to your hands, consider, dear lady, consider, dear man, you left them their pride and you left them their land. And what have you done to these ones? Has a change come about, Uncle Sam? Or are you still taking our land? A treaty forever George Washington signed. He did, dear lady, he did, dear man. And the treaty's being broken by Kinzo Dam. And what will you do for these ones? Oh, it's all in the past, you can say, but it's still going on here today. The government now wants the Iroquois land, that of the Seneca and the Cheyenne. It's here and it's now, you must help us, dear man, now that the buffalo's gone.
Folk singing has come to be associated with many different political views. The civil rights question has been posed again and again and again by people who are in the folk singing world. I've concentrated more on Indian rights, which are not to be confused with civil rights. There are civil rights, there are treaty rights. And very often, today, as well as hundreds of years ago, the Indians have been mistreated and are still being mistreated, as in the case of the Yaquis in Tucson and the California Indians who have received recently 42 cents an acre for their land. And many of the people in Montana are having a very bad time because they're not getting the proper kind of consideration. The treaties are being broken. The Treaty of Kinzua Dam was broken. This is called the Pickering Treaty, and it was drawn up by Washington in exchange for services that the Seneca Indians had done during the Revolution. And the treaty was unilaterally broken by the United States government. This was just last year, in order that a flood control, so-called, dam might be built in the Allegheny Valley. However, the Indians hired an engineer to find out if the dam were necessary, and if it were necessary that they be evicted in order for a flood control dam to be built in the area. And no, it wasn't necessary that the dam be built there. There were two alternative sites that would have saved the government a good deal of money and enabled the Indians to stay where they like, in possession of their land. But no, the land was taken back, the Indians were evicted, and this is going on all over the country. I think this world needs a new approach. I personally have found my way in the world, which does not necessarily mean singing, but I have found my identity in the world. Now, I am not telling any younger generation to forget mimicking me for any reason except that when one is trying to find his own way, the only way to do it is to go ahead. And there's a new world for the younger generation that I can't possibly know. Sooner or later, each person and each generation has to pick up the ball and carry it themselves.
Most of the young topical singers create their songs in the midst of an active social life. Like the folk song artists of the Depression, they find their raw material in the issues of the day. But Buffy Sainte-Marie is essentially a loner, going her own way and writing out of the intense personal feeling of her private life.
I was raised in Maine and in Massachusetts. I'm an adopted child, originally of Cree Indian descent. I was raised with a family who is part Indian of the Micmac tribe. I grew up in a town called Wakefield, Massachusetts, and in another town at Sebago Lake, Maine. Attended school, went to high school, had a life much like every other American or Canadian kid. And I went to college, and when I graduated, I came to New York, and I began singing in the coffee houses the songs that I'd sung all along to my friends and family.
You're not a dream, you're not an angel, you're a man. I'm not a queen, I'm a woman, take my hand. We'll make a space in the lives that we planned, and here we'll stay till it's time for you to go. Yes, we're different, worlds apart, we're not the same. We laughed and played at the start like in a game. You could have stayed outside my heart, but in you came, and here you'll stay until it's time for you to go. Don't ask why, don't ask how, beginning, it has no end. I was an oak, now I'm a willow, now I can bend. And though I'll never in my life see you again, still I'll stay until it's time for you to go. Don't ask why of me. Don't ask how of me. Don't ask forever of me. Love me, love me now. You're not a dream, you're not an angel, you're a man. I'm not a queen, I'm a woman. Take my hand, we'll make a space in the lives that we'd planned, and here we'll stay until it's time for you to go.
To write a topical song, all you need is a guitar and an idea. But it is somewhat harder to write a good one and to find an audience for testing it. Pete Seeger at New York's Village Gate has instituted a series of Sunday afternoon workshops where established and beginning writers can bring their songs for criticism. Perhaps these young people don't have a clear-cut program for saving the world, but in the process of finding themselves, they feel they have discovered many things that are wrong with their own country, and through their music, they have found a way to communicate effectively with the rest of us.
Up there. I got news of the very best kind about trouble that are falling behind about people that used to be blind till they open up their eyes to see. It's new. It's new when they begin to ask why they're poor. Until on the first day God made the dark night and created the sweet morning of light. They say that freedom, grain of sand. The minds are closing rapidly and it cannot understand. On the second day he made the sky. From the water it rose on high. He's a constant dying. One leaf of grass.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.